It's 6 p.m. Eastern. It's time for the Daily Wrap. And welcome to the show. I'm Joe Concha, joined by my co-host and former Connect 4 champion. Who knew? Forbes columnist Rick Unger is here.
Let's Connect 4.
Also, she was one of Philadelphia's top attorneys and is rumored to be next in line to replace Judge Judy. Good for you,
right.
Heather
Yeah,
Hansen.
take that money.
You do want that one.
And welcome. And finally, we are honored to have best-selling author, founder of the World Values Network. He's America's Rabbi.
Also rumored to take over from Judge Judy. It's a bit of a competition.
Really? They said there was...
I don't think you should give it this away just yet.
I know just the entertainment.
This election has
lawyer
not yet
for
been
you both.
decided.
That's right.
There was a dark horse they mentioned, but I had no idea. This will be very interesting. Okay, let's get right to the Daily Download. Well, today in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, facing the biggest election of his career, looks like he's going to be keeping his position as Prime Minister, maybe. Fox News, CNN not calling this right now, but exit polls out of Israel seem to indicate that Netanyahu will hold on to power. We're going to take a look back at how this race was defined. Netanyahu's campaign centered around Iran's threat to Israel. The opposition claiming Netanyahu was just fear-mongering, but Bibi has clearly used and cleverly used the world stage to draw attention to the Israeli election while attacking the Obama administration over a pending deal with Iran. Here is the Israeli Prime Minister in front of Congress just a few weeks ago.
This deal has two major concessions. One, leaving Iran with a vast nuclear program. And two, lifting the restrictions on that program in about a decade. That's why this deal is so bad. It doesn't block Iran's path to the bomb, it paves Iran's path to the bomb.
Now, this purported deal has two major concessions. One, leaving Iran with a vast nuclear program, and two, lifting the restrictions on that program in about a decade. That's why this deal is so bad. It doesn't block Iran's path ultimately to the bomb. It paves Iran's path to the bomb, as Mr. Netanyahu said. The race is drawn. A lot of attention here in the United States, including celebrities like Jon Voight.
President Obama does not love Israel. His whole agenda is to control Israel, and in this way he can be friends with all of Israel's enemies. He doesn't want Bibi Netanyahu to win this upcoming election. America has not been the same since his presidency. I beg everyone, all of you, to understand the truth. Those like Yitzhak Herzog, who believe that deal-making is the solution to what Israel faces, are as wrong as Neville Chamberlain believing he made a peace deal with Hitler.
Jon Voight, who never really was able to make peace with Angelina Jolie, I believe, but he knows of what he speaks in terms of foreign policy. Anyway, Netanyahu today accusing left-wing NGO of busing in Arab voters to try to oust him. At this point, we don't know if that strategy worked or not. As we said again, exit polls seem to indicate that Mr. Netanyahu will hold on to power. However, it's not being called yet by any of the major networks, including this one. And we probably won't know, at least until this evening, a more definitive tone, as Rick Unger has cautioned, and he'll talk about in a moment. Exit polls out of Israel can be a little more tricky than they are here in the United States. So let's start with America's Rabbi. Shumli, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, great to have you. And I like the tie, by the way. You're looking very Irish.
You know,
I
think it's only the Jew on this set that remembered it was St. Patty's Day.
No, you're not.
Oh, there you go. You're rocking the green.
I was trying to be exclusive here.
And my aunt's grandfather was the chief rabbi of Dublin.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
good to know.
There.
Well, I once had a French pint of Guinness in Dublin, so I think that counts. But I just want to thank the Irish for sharing the Israeli election on St. Patty's Day. I see that it's very magnanimous of them.
Oh, sure. Good relations between Dublin and Tel Aviv, as far as
Exactly.
I know. So if the results hold up as the exit polls show them to be, are you surprised that Netanyahu was able to hold on here?
No, I'm not surprised. I mean, he is this international figure of global stature, and I think Israelis understand that amidst the need of focus on economic issues, paying the rent, affording bread and cottage cheese, that Israel does face these great genocidal existential threats. You have an Iran nuclear program looming. There's a deal about to be signed, probably by the end of this month. That's the deadline. I think Israelis understand they need someone who can draw world attention to Hezbollah in the north and Syria in the northeast and Hamas to the west, et cetera, et cetera. Having said all that, it's a very close election. And Netanyahu may have to go for a national unity government. I don't expect that to happen. But he'll have to have a much more broad-based coalition. And hopefully a lot of the rancor of this rambunctious election can diminish so that Israelis can be united again. The real victor today is the people of Israel. I mean, let's not cease to be astonished that a country facing all of these threats in the world's most tyrannical region, I mean, you got like ISIS 100 miles away, pulled off a democratic election with Jews and Arabs. That's extraordinary, and let's salute the majesty of Israeli democracy.
Heather.
Just talking about the rancor of this election, how do you think it's going to impact relationships between Obama and Netanyahu? I mean, it was already pretty bad, but some of the things that went on with this election, there's allegations that Obama somehow funded some of the trying to oust him. How do you think that will play for Bibi?
Well, let's not pretend for a moment that President Obama wanted Bibi to win this election. They don't like each other. They don't even fake it anymore.
Right.
But I think President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu are big boys. I think that they're mature adults. They understand the need to subordinate any kind of personal animus to affairs of state. Iran is as big a threat to the United States, the great Satan, as it is to Israel, the little Satan. They're going to be forced to work together. It doesn't make a difference anymore. If Netanyahu wins, the president will no doubt find some working relationship with him. By the way, let's remember that Yitzhak Herzog and Tzipi Livni are also opposed to the Iran deal. It was the one area where all three major prime ministerial candidates were in accord.
Rick, what do you think created this great divide between the President Obama
Well, I
and
think
Netanyahu ultimately? It just seems like it just kept building and building, but I never saw a starting point as to why it ever happened.
the rabbi's right. They don't like each other, but I think what's happened as this has moved along, we've now gone from personality disagreement to policy disagreement. And I think no small amount of this is the result of everybody constantly jumping the gun. We still don't know what the agreement that's going to be proposed, if any, will be with the Iranians. That's number one. Number two, you have John Voight there doing what everybody else does. Oh, Obama's so terrible, this and that. Will somebody please tell me what the alternative is other than no deal? Because no deal means that the Iranians continue to develop their weapon. I don't like that. Nobody does. So, this is all a lot. And even with the election, we don't even know yet where it's at. We're going on exit polls and people are declaring him the winner. It's crazy.
And that will have to be the last word on this topic, but I'm sure we'll be discussing it more, particularly tomorrow night when we hopefully have the official results on this breaking news. Coming up next, President Obama has someone to blame for ISIS. Wait till you hear who it is. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. I'm Joe Concha, along with my co-host Rick Unger, Heather Hansen, and the Rabbi Shmuley. The war on ISIS has been hard fought, either from the air or on the ground. If you talk to Iraqi troops, the Pentagon has estimated that roughly 6,000 members of the terrorist army have been killed since the air campaign began last fall. There is still debate, however, over how effective the campaign has been overall. Fox News reporting that according to their military and intelligence sources, ISIS senior leadership remains largely untouched. Meanwhile, President Obama is feeling pressure from Americans who are growing tired of the ISIS threat, according to a recent CNN ORC poll. Still don't know what ORC stands for. 57% of Americans disapprove of how the president is handling ISIS. Back in September, less than half, 49%, disapproved. Well, the president is now trying to shift the attention away on the matter, but who to blame? Here's the commander-in-chief on HBO's Vice answering that question. Why did ISIS grow so quickly?
ISIL is a direct outgrowth of al-Qaeda in Iraq that grew out of our invasion, which is an example of unintended consequences, which is why we should generally aim before we shoot.
Well, at least the interviewer challenged him when he said that, but he gave a nice to that and was very pensive when listening to the president. Anyway, did the president just really blame the growth of ISIS on President Bush? We'll get back to that in a second. The president also continuing the rhetoric of the growth of ISIS is because of unemployed Sunnis who have no opportunities.
The underlying problem of disaffected Sunnis around the world, but particularly in some of these areas, including Libya, including Yemen, where a young man who's growing up, has no education, has no prospects for the future, is looking around, and the one way that he can get validation, power, respect is if he's a fighter. And this looks like the toughest gang around, so let me affiliate with them.
Again, great mms in that interview. So, what's going to compel terrorists to stop killing us? Show me the money.
And we can't keep on thinking about counterterrorism and security as entirely separate from diplomacy, development, education, all these things that are considered soft, but in fact are vital to our national security, and we do not fund those. If you ask the average person, how much do we spend on foreign aid? They'll say 25% of the federal budget.
Right.
Well, it's a little over 1%. We should be thinking about making investments there that ultimately save us from having to send our young men and women to fight.
So, Mr. Unger, do you agree with the president in terms of President Bush being to blame for the growth of ISIL or ISIS or whatever we're calling it today?
Look, you know, I know it's a lot of fun to, whenever the president refers back to that era of our history, oh, he's blaming Bush again. Look, you can't deny history just because it's politically uncomfortable. The fact of the matter is, nobody disputes that ISIL is grew out of, came from Iraq Al-Qaeda in Iraq. That's a fact. There's no point in arguing it. Now, you can criticize this president for not catching on to it sooner than he did and making a bigger fuss. But nothing he said there is even close to untrue. So that's point number one. Point number two.
Can I stop you before you get point number two?
Okay, sure.
All right, on your point number one.
If you must.
Wasn't the growth, I mean, the true growth, didn't that really come when troops were pulled out of Iraq?
No, actually, I would argue the true growth came in about 2006 when the organization that was now ISIL were able to spring a whole bunch of Sunni commanders that were part of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, who had previously been part of the Saddam regime, military regime.
Right.
They sprung them out of jail, brought them into their organization, and they are now the people who run the thing.
And then there was a surge that squashed that,
So
and things
no,
are relatively
the surge
peaceful.
did not destroy it. The surge definitely thinned the ranks.
Yes.
But it did not destroy Al-Qaeda in, this is, a misnomer.
So it shrank and then it grew when American troops
put those
came
people
out.
in jail and they took them out. Now, you know what? We can have that debate forever as to what would have happened if we had kept them. I can't tell you you're wrong. And by the way, you can't tell me you're right because nobody's ever going to know this.
Maybe we could let Heather decide.
Well,
I think
she
it's
can
a
decide all
distraction.
she wants,
I think
but,
it's a complete
you know.
distraction. I think that we're talking about something that's completely unimportant. And in fact, the question that was asked was not how did this all start historically. What the question that was asked in that interview was how did they become so popular?
Wait. Was there a question ever asked in that interview?
There
I
was.
just shook his head.
There was. I actually watched the whole interview.
I'm not
Other
sure
than-
popular was the word that they
No,
used.
that is. It absolutely is. I
Popular
watched
with
it.
who?
I watched it more than once because I wanted to make sure that he was actually answering the question asked since everyone's made such a big fuss about it. And that was the question asked. And rather than referring to the fact that, I called them JV, I don't really know how they became so popular either, he went to a history lesson.
Would you agree if
which
we
is a
had never
deterrent.
invaded Iraq, that
But
they
I don't
never
think
would have
it
been an
makes a
ISIL?
lick of difference. No, you've got.
You're going back to something that is 12 years old now. We know why ISIS came to power. It's because the Obama administration did not support any of the opposition groups who were fighting for their freedom under the most murderous dictator of our time, Bashar al-Assad. Now, yesterday,
So wait, now it's a Syria question.
John Kerry almost disgraced himself by suddenly saying that the United States sees a role for Assad to play in the peace negotiations. Now, wait a second. Wasn't this the guy that you, John Kerry, were trying to create an international coalition to punish for gassing Arab children? Have we forgotten about that? Using poison gas against kids. Does the United States have no values? Does it have no heart? Does it have no decency? This isn't decent. It's astonishing. Now, the breakdown of Syria is directly it resulted from the United States allowing the entire country to disintegrate and doing absolutely nothing. So when the president sits there and says, maybe we should spend more money on foreign policy and get a bit involved, Mr. President, you drew a red line in the sand that you mocked, that you made a farce of by not enforcing it. So let's be honest about this. The United States needs to stand for something. Now, we can debate whether there should have been an invasion of Iraq. But if we have to debate whether we should punish a dictator who gasses children, then we stand
like
precisely
Saddam
for
Hussein?
nothing. Exactly.
Okay.
Saddam Hussein used poison
So
gas
anybody
Rick
uses
Blackford.
in
poison
1988.
gas.
Well, poison gas for me as a Jew has a particular nefarious
As
connotation
it does
that I
for me.
exactly.
We should go after anybody who uses poison gas
I
in the
think
country.
that if the
Because I'm
president,
about to give you a list
I
of
think
people we
if
didn't
the
go
president of
after.
the United States says this is a red line, I am the most powerful man on earth. Don't do it because you're going to be punished. And then he says, well, you know what? I was kind of not serious. That's a problem.
And if we had done what he said, which was go bomb them or whatever, because of the red line, who would be running Syria today in your estimation?
Well, you know what? Had we supported,
We're going to run out of time.
had we
so.
supported
It would be
groups that are
ISIL.
not ISIL,
It would
no,
be ISIL,
No,
and
no.
we were
Guys, we
ISIS
gotta
came
go.
to power because we didn't support other groups.
We gotta
were
go.
supporting them.
Can I just have a button that says skip commercial and just keep going? That would be nice. Anyway, coming up next in the Daily Wrap, should Pete Rose, that's a transition, his ban from baseball be lifted? MLB commissioner is thinking about it. This is the Daily Wrap only on Newsmax TV.
After nearly 3 decades in the game, baseball for Pete Rose became a vanished reality Thursday. Baseball Commissioner Bart Giamatti in New York ended 6 months of swirling questions and banished Pete Rose permanently from baseball in front of a backdrop appropriately draped in funereal black.
The banishment for life of Pete Rose from baseball is the sad end of a sorry episode. One of the game's greatest players has engaged in a variety of acts which have stained the game, and he must now live with the consequences of those acts.
In Cincinnati, Pete Rose fought through the sweeping emotion and finality of his judgment day.
And as you can imagine, this is a very sad day. You know, I've been in baseball 3 decades, and to think that I'm going to be out of baseball for a very short period of time.
That was CNN 26 years ago, reporting that Pete Rose was thrown out of baseball. Welcome back to Daily Wrap with Rick Unger, Heather Hansen, and the Rabbi Shmuley. I am Joe Concha, and I am your leadoff man and utility player for this particular segment. That's a little wordplay using some baseball terminology. Anyway, since that August day in 1989, Pete Rose has been trying to get himself back into baseball, appealing to one baseball commissioner after another. Bud Selig didn't think Charlie Hustle should be allowed to return, particularly when it comes to Canton in the Hall of Fame, when asked by Charlie Rose this past January.
I just felt, obviously, by not doing anything, that it was in baseball's best interest, and everyone's best interest, to leave the suspension as it was.
Well, with Selig out now as commissioner and baseball with a new one in Rob Manfred, it seems that he may have a little bit more of an open mind.
When you have a request like this, I think it's important and, in fact, incumbent on me to understand all that went on, what led Commissioner Giamatti to where he landed on the issue, what the agreement was that was reached, and why that agreement was reached. And so, you know, I need to really start from square one in terms of those facts.
Okay, so Pete Rose bet on baseball. He sort of admitted it, and then he was kicked out. Should the new commissioner forgive and forget and allow him back into baseball, more importantly, into the Hall of Fame?
See, that's the thing. In 1989, he was kicked out of baseball. In 1991, they changed the rules so that he could no longer be allowed in the Hall of Fame. So that's one of the reasons that I think that he should be allowed in the Hall of Fame. The other thing for me that's important is that what he did had no impact on the game that he was playing. You compare that to A-Rod, you compare that to some of the others like Bonds who have been accused of...
He never bet on anybody against his
He
team.
always bet for his team.
Yes,
So
he
all
did.
of those things in conjunction, to me, makes it seems fair to allow him back in. It seems fair. I mean, he's the only person, I believe, that's ever been completely suspended forever from the game of baseball. It just doesn't seem fair, given what we see in all these other sports, given what we see in the NFL, and all of, you know, what other baseball players have done. It just doesn't seem right that he should pay such a price for what is relatively minor infraction.
Rick, I guess that's the question, that do we bring into play the person, as obviously the stats, you know, most hits ever, right? And Charlie Hustle and all the championships that he won and so on. So no one could argue his resume. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Awesome.
But a guy like Ty Cobb, for instance, wasn't the
Miserable
best person in the
human
world,
being,
right?
right.
And Mantle was a drunk. And you could just go on and on and on, like when you find things off the field. However, this affected the integrity of the game, betting on it, even though he didn't bet against his team.
Heather's
Your thought?
analysis was really, really very good. Because I agree with the result. I will say his transgression was not minor. Betting on baseball is a big deal. But I think the punishment for what he did was being thrown out of baseball forever. For a guy like Pete Rose, that was a horrible, remarkable punishment. But it has nothing to do with his performance as a player. He's not being offered up into the Hall of Fame as a manager. It might have an impact on that. That's when he did it. But as a player, who was better? Of course he should be in the Hall of Fame.
Rabbi.
Well, as someone who had to give up professional sports for a higher calling, because I think this kind of masculine perfection speaks for itself. I think it's time for a little bit of forgiveness. Brian Williams got 6 months. Pete Rose got lifetime suspension. It's been almost 3 decades already. I would give a course of true change. Let him do something spectacular that would win over the confidence of the public, for the public to say this man really has changed, and now he's done great things for baseball, and he should be forgiven. Because punitive measures that don't have any kind of rectification just kind of always strike me the wrong way. He's not a terrible human being. He did something bad. Give him something that he can do to change it.
Let's do a lightning round to end this. Does he get back into baseball? Does the new commissioner say, Pete, welcome back?
I bet he does.
I think so too.
Not back into baseball, but into the Hall of Fame.
That'll be the compromise.
I think that's a possibility. It's still a long shot for him.
I watched that sod. I'm a yay. I watched that soundbite earlier.
On the phone. We have decided this
from the commissioner, and
unanimously, by the way.
Yes.
I get the feeling that this new commissioner will bring him back in, that time has finally healed this wound, and yes, you're right, not in baseball as a hitting coach or something for somebody, but certainly into Canton with a very big asterisk next to his name. Anyway, when we come back, it's potluck time, and then yay or nay. Wow, this is the Daily Wrap, and it's only on Newsmax TV. Welcome back to the Daily Wrap. It's potluck time. This is the part of the show where we go around the table and share our favorite stories of the day. Heather, you're the best dressed. You get to go first.
Mine's a bit of a downer. We found out this week that federal agencies mistakenly paid $125 billion in mistaken payments, mainly to Medicare, Medicaid, and earned income tax credits. That's $392 per person in just mistaken money going out the door.
What does that mean? Like, how do you mistakenly pay?
A lot of it has to do with Social Security numbers and the fact that many people who are deceased, those numbers are still out there, and whether
so they're paying dead people.
Yes, exactly.
Some of it is fraud, Medicare fraud, a big chunk of it.
But not as much of it as you might think. Not as much of it as you might think. And the question, it sort of begs the question when you say that, what is it? So how can we fix it? Because I think that that's what we need to do. I mean, when you talk about that kind of money, such a huge part, this week they're also talking about trying to deal with the debt ceiling and how we're going to balance the budget. And this is a huge part of it that you would think would need to be fixed to start. And is it smaller government? Does the right hand not know what the left hand's doing?
It shows contempt for the taxpayer. People work really hard for their money. To think that, I know that Bruce Willis talks to dead people. The fact that they are paying dead people, that's astonishing.
Bruce Willis actually didn't talk to the dead people.
He was one of the dead people.
He was dead. Right, the kid, who's probably like 35 years old.
Away? I haven't seen it yet.
Joe, that was a little test, and you passed.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and the movie came out in '99, so I think it's 16 years
nobody is going to defend this. It's terrible. But you know what? It's interesting. It's not so much government not caring about the taxpayer. It's about really, really bad computer systems in every single division of our government, which is the laughable part about us getting so freaked out about Hillary. Her computer probably worked a whole lot better than the government computers.
If she had used it correctly, it would have worked a whole lot better.
Cataloging it. It's ridiculous, and it is. And Medicare fraud, you're right, it's not the biggest part of that number, to be fair, but it is a very large number. And it's somebody once asked me if I would take a job in government, what would it be? I'd said I'd be the cop to track down Medicare fraud, because this is the worst.
It's got to be in part because government is just too big. I think
that
even
if you make it smaller, Medicare is not going to get smaller. That's the thing.
Well, but right, we need to, and especially now with Obamacare on top of it.
Some of us are getting to be 65. Right? Don't mess with Medicare, girl.
I'm not looking to mess with it. I'm looking for somebody to fix it. Because when you see money wasted like this, money that could be spent on the defense, which we have the whole debate about that coming up right now, it's absolutely frustrating as heck, and it's got to be a better way to take care of these types of problems first.
Can't argue.
Well said. Rabbi, you're our second chef.
Well, being that I took out an ad with my organization for Senator Menendez, And given that I was personally involved, that makes it my personal favorite. There's a big Jewish value of gratitude. Senator Menendez, interestingly, had all these allegations leaked against him as to wrongdoing. It's illegal to leak it, but he's been a phenomenal friend of Israel. So we took out an ad in the New York Times that thanked him for being the scourge of Iran, which is the most wicked government on earth that slaughters their own people in the streets, that when they demonstrate, they hang gays from public squares on cranes, and they're the biggest state sponsor of terror, and being a great friend to Israel. I think that gratitude is the defining characteristic of our humanity. Do you stand up for friends, especially when they are in tough moments? So given that Senator Menendez is the only real bipartisan bridge, or the foremost bipartisan bridge, in increasing sanctions against Iran, or in ensuring that there's some sort of a senatorial oversight of this deal, Senate ratification necessary for the deal that President Obama wants to sign with Iran before the end of this month, I wanted to stand up and show him that we appreciate his efforts. Look, in the final analysis, our government is negotiating right now with another government that calls for the annihilation and destruction of the Jewish people. And Ayatollah Ali Khamenei tweeted in November that the only cure for Israel is annihilation. That's astonishing, that we haven't said to the Iranians first and foremost, look, we're not even going to talk to you until you stop saying you want to kill all the Jews. That's kind of astonishing. And if it were any other group, I wonder if we'd still be talking to them. Just because we had one Holocaust doesn't mean that we think that another should be permitted, and Senator Menendez has been a great friend.
What happens to Senator Menendez now? Is this enough to stick? I mean, it does seem like there's a lot of evidence there, but the timing, I think, is the more curious part of it, right?
Yeah, well, 3 days after he gives this incredible speech opposing the administration's policies vis-a-vis Iran, there is this leak against them. Again, that leak is illegal. I don't know what's going to happen. Now, and our ad is not about looking at the allegations. It's about saying we are grateful and don't think we just abandon our friends when they're in tough moments. Again, I believe in gratitude. I think that we have to be touched by the kindness of others and not just walk away when people get in trouble.
I'd be really cautious about mixing the two. Look, I mean, you're right about the leak being illegal. Timing-wise, this investigation began a very long time ago, long before any of this, and it was a grand jury hearing. That's what's so disturbing about the leak coming out. What happens to him will depend on what a court of law says should happen to him.
But we can't say thank you?
So,
no matter what.
I think it's
I don't
vital.
actually agree with all of his policies, but of course you can say
Well,
that.
and on this particular issue, I'm really hopeful that he can still get a coalition together so that they can override President Obama's veto and make it so the Congress has to look at it.
And there are only 2 Senate votes away. They're about 65, they need 67.
Probably would have had more if that speech hadn't happened, don't you think?
I'm not sure. I mean, you
And
could
that
say
letter
that,
hadn't made
if the
sense.
alarm were not sounded, that people wouldn't understand the gravity of the threat.
And on that note, we'll leave you, but we're only halfway through our meal. When we come back, even more potluck for you, including my own. This is the Daily Wrap, and it's only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. I'm Joe Concha. If you're just joining us, we're in the middle of our potluck, where we share our favorite stories of the day. Rick, beauty before age, or age before beauty. I always forget the saying.
Well, in this case, obviously, it's not age before beauty because I go first.
Very good point.
Right? Yeah. Okay. So here is what I want to posit today in potluck. I noticed that Senator Ted Cruz was in New Hampshire over the weekend, gave his usual stump speech where he warned us all that the world is on fire. Happened to scare a little girl in the audience who was 3 years old, who wanted to know if the world was really on fire. Well, she was 4. Okay, my mistake. I should be more accurate than that. Then we see other people doing something. My question is, look, we have problems in the world. We've always had problems in the world. We've had problems in the world for as long as I can remember, and as you all know, that's a very long time, right? We have problems. We have problems with terrorism. It's real. We have problems with Iran, which is to me the same as terrorism. Those problems are real. But you know what? As I like to point out to people, we have problems with a lot of things that are likely to kill you quicker and kill more people than these other issues. I'm not saying don't suggest or don't tell people the way it really is, but this fear tactic that Republicans, I have to say, have been using for as long as I can remember does a great disservice to the world. This is why I'm not supportive of Bibi Netanyahu, who I do believe has the best interest of Israel at heart, but he is always engaged and really did it the past 2 days with fear tactics.
Well, you know, to quote a great philosopher, Yogi Berra, he said, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you.
Out to get
now,
you.
Now, Joan, I'm a little bit surprised that you're saying this because there's a difference between fear and caution. Fear is a hysterical response to an imagined threat, but caution is a calculated response to a real danger.
I agree.
Now, to say that Iraqi children being blown up every day, 250-odd Pakistani children killed by the Taliban, all the young women in Boko Haram in Nigeria, to say that we're fear-mongering, to say that Iran, which is an
You haven't
oil
mentioned
superpower...
the United States yet.
But to say that Iran... Well,
And by the way,
I think every human being's blood is as red as the other. I'm not just worried about American lives.
Are you arguing for caution? Is that your point?
I'm saying that there are horrible things happening in the world that are astonishing, including ISIS chopping people's heads off.
It's terrible.
And millions of people watching it as kind of pornographic entertainment.
Is the world
and you're
on fire?
saying... Well, I was just in Iceland where it's quite literally on fire with all these volcanoes, but yeah, it is on
No,
fire.
it's not. No.
There are a lot of bad people getting away with a lot of bad stuff,
And they always
we
have.
can't just dismiss it.
Okay.
And
I'm not saying
we
to
need to
dismiss
learn
it.
from history.
I'm not saying to
Before-
dismiss it. I'm saying be honest about it.
You asked the question, is the world on fire?
Yeah.
And I would quote the Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, or former at least, that he said it was.
Well, maybe that's why he's the former Secretary of Defense.
Okay.
The world is
Maybe because he
not
didn't
on
put the
fire.
fires out is why he's
Isn't it
former.
okay,
True.
Rick, isn't it okay to say the world is on fire, but we can put it out? Because that's actually what Ted Cruz did.
No,
and now
that's
that
what
child,
he came back and
No,
said to that child.
Right.
He makes that
But
speech
that is-
everywhere he goes, and he
Rick,
has not said
There's
that.
nothing wrong with that. Just say there's fear, and we can face it, and we can beat it. That's
Why
that's
isn't he up there
strength.
making a
That's
speech?
strong.
If you were this in family of an American serviceman who served in
Of
Iraq,
which
and now
I
you
know many.
see that your loved one died for nothing because these animals like ISIS are taking over cities, and the United States just watches it passively, I think you kind of feel that the world's going to hell in a handbasket.
do
We
you
really,
believe-
really have to end it here soon. Can you give a 10-second? Go
ahead, go ahead,
No,
go
no,
ahead.
just a nice climactic ending. 10 seconds.
The climatic ending is, do you really think we're ever going to get rid of terrorism in our lifetime?
I think
Yours
that-
is a
I
little
think
longer
we
than
need to
mine.
be-
Rhetorical. No, we can't. No.
Okay.
We don't quite understand what's happening here. If this were Heather or the rabbi, I'd say, let's just keep talking. Screw their potluck. But I put some effort into this, and I could only do this potluck today because happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. Just don't call it St. Patty's Day because true Irish blood doesn't like that very much. And my mother's maiden name was Naomi Gallagher, so I know of which I speak. Okay, you know why you don't call it St. Patty's Day? Because Patty is short for Patricia, not Patrick. But let's face it, many of you who celebrate St. Patrick's Day tend to get a lot of things wrong about Irish heritage. Exhibit A, drinking Killian's beer on St. Patrick's Day. Don't think you were drinking anything imported from a factory in Ireland. Oh no, it's made by Coors, headquartered in the hippie state of Colorado. That's right, I said it. Exhibit B, Lucky Charms. Yes, let's put that up on screen.
They're always after me, Lucky Charms.
Where's the leprechaun?
What? Why's everyone always laugh when I say that? They are after me, Lucky Charms.
Okay, Lucky Charms, it isn't a cereal you should have eaten this morning to feel more Irish. It's made in Minneapolis and General Mills, okay? So, Exhibit C, as Rick plans on doing after the show, visiting the Tilted Kilter Bennigan's, which is about as Irish as Hillary Clinton, who was honored as such yesterday because she wasn't Irish. Both the Tilted Kilter and Bennigan's are, yes, they began here in America and they were changed. In Ireland, they're not drinking green beer in pubs today. Instead, many residents there attended church and spent the day at home. In fact, do you know that pubs in Ireland had to remain shut for St. Patrick's Day until the late 1970s? Irish law said, no, this is a religious holiday, so I don't want to hear it. Celebrate it the right way. Anyway, that's all the time we have for Potluck. Yay or Nay is next. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And let me tell you something else about St. Patrick's Day. The whole myth around wearing green. Guess what they don't do in Ireland? Right? They're not wearing green. All right? It's not part of the whole thing. So you know what though? I gave into this whole thing, and I am taking off.
Can we do it too?
The damn tie.
Can we do it too?
No, it's my no. Of course you can if you like.
Potluck.
What do you think, Rabbi?
Wow.
I was
We're wearing
gonna wear
green ties.
a green yarmulke today.
The cream yarmulke.
A green yarmulke.
Oh, okay, the green. Okay, well, anyway, everybody, welcome back to the Daily Wrap. I'm not wearing a tie on the air.
Now
Who
you're
does that?
uncomfortable.
Anyway, it's time for yay or nay. It all came down to a letter. No, not the letter Senate Republicans sent to Iran, but rather a letter penned by real estate mogul Robert Durst sent to his former friend and spokesman, Susan Berman. A year later, she was murdered. A letter that ended up being a key piece of evidence in the investigation of said murder. A letter Durst said only the murderer could have sent. Well, it turns out Mr. Durst was exactly right. And he has now been charged with first-degree murder for shooting Berman execution style in her Beverly Hills home nearly 15 years ago. The letter was spotted by Jinx director Andrew Jarecki while shooting the HBO documentary about Durst. Jarecki noticed a similarity in the handwriting and the fact that Beverly in Beverly Hills on the letter was spelled wrong. So that was the giveaway. Jarecki presented Durst with his findings, and he only admitted to writing one of the letters, and then he went into the bathroom where, with his microphone still on, which we do here all the time, he whispered, quote, "There it is, you're caught. What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course." So, panel, is Robert Durst the stupidest murderer in history? Rabbi.
He appears to be an incredibly stupid murderer. Not that I think there's a lot of smart murderers, because you kind of shouldn't murder people. But if I had to grade them, yeah, yay, he is the stupidest murderer.
Very good. Heather, you're a lawyer.
You know what? He has gotten off so many times. This is what, the third case that he's actually been accused, so he can't be as stupid as he seems, because he keeps seeming to slip through the cracks.
3 strikes and you're out, Rick?
Well, first, Joe Eric Bowling Concha. Let me say that let me do the job I seem to have to do here. The entire first paragraph you just said, it's all alleged. And secondly, he is not a murderer. He is an alleged murderer.
Yeah, please, okay, I sign on to that. Alleged murderer.
Please.
I'm glad we got some lawyers on this show.
So,
That's a very good point. Rick is a lawyer, and we shouldn't try him here, but what the hell, I am, because he chopped up a woman, right?
Right,
allegedly.
No, he definitely.
Right,
well,
and
he-
claimed
he
self-defense.
did.
The
He
neighbor,
admits to
yeah,
that,
he pled self-defense
He claimed
on that.
self-defense, and then they
I'd
got
be
rid of
more
the body
concerned
that way.
about the jury that agreed with him.
Right,
And
in
it wasn't.
Texas.
It
It was a
wasn't even
Texas
in
jury.
LA.
It wasn't
Usually
even
in
a
LA,
California
Well,
jury
you
will go for
can
that.
get
Yeah.
away with murder, right? I mean,
Usually
you
in
know,
LA.
you can,
LA
especially
County,
in
you
LA.
can kill whoever you want and get away with it.
Not to go off,
alleged.
Allegedly.
not to go off on too much of a tangent, but in that self-defense in Texas, he chopped up the body
Yeah.
and then throw it in the bottom of Galveston Bay,
Yep.
and they let him go.
Yep.
Yeah,
In
he's not a,
Texas.
he is a murderer. Screw the alleged part.
Allegedly.
Anyway, movie
Allegedly.
stars are often away from their opulent mansions for long periods of time when they're off making movies. But don't feel too bad for them. Their movie trailers aren't too shabby either. Take Brad Pitt's so-called trailer, for example. It's featured in the new season of Celebrity Motorhomes. Wow, look at this. The 48-foot-long, $1 million trailer features a $60,000 chef's kitchen with a full-size fridge, dishwasher, 4 extra-large pull-out beds, a 10-foot leather sofa, and a big screen TV, and a master bedroom with a queen-size bed, 2 bathrooms, not 1, and a walk-in shower for 2. Remember, this is a trailer. Should Brad Pitt's movie trailer, Rick Unger, be nicer than any apartment we've ever owned? Yay or nay?
Well, mine has a king-size bed, so I don't quite see what the big deal is.
I don't
Your
like
trailer? Good Lord.
Heather.
You know what? He makes a whole lot of money, and he's got like 600 kids to fill that trailer, so he may as well have it.
That's true. He does have 600 kids.
He can afford it.
Well, we're an RVing family, so I actually recognize that RV. I think I sold it to him before it was upgraded. I say live and let live. The guy's successful. He does have a lot of kids, and being outdoors and taking them to these beautiful places, just lend it to me
is
when you're not using it.
America.
Okay?
I'm a yay as well, and just the fact that something like that actually exists.
Yeah, it's pretty
Right?
darn
That was impressive, very impressive. So we all know that sugary drinks and snacks are bad for us, but Coca-Cola says their products are a sensible snack. The soda giant has been heavily promoting their mini cans as a guilt-free way to enjoy the product, even going so far as sponsoring ads during their American Heart Month. Yes, where they actually wrote blog posts saying that this is a really good snack idea. So, quickly, panel, can soda be a sensible snack? Rabbi.
Well, I indulge it all the time, and that's why I can sport the rabbinical monopack. I don't believe in the division of a six-pack. I believe in pluribus unum, from the many one. So Coca-Cola should give me a T-shirt, and I should be a...
Spokesman.
Rabbis are so articulate. Heather,
He'd
quickly.
He'd be better than a dietitian. I think they're fine in moderation, but I don't think dietitians should be pushing them.
Rick?
I'm still laughing. The rabbi's hysterical. I love this guy. That's really funny. No, of course it's not good for you.
I'll tell you, one time I was actually above 200 pounds. I'm around 177 right now.
This is
And
more
the
than we need to
quickest
know
way
about
to
you.
lose weight is to give up Coca-Cola and bread. And that's what we leave you with. Panel, so much. Thank you for being here, Rabbi. You're incredible. That is the Daily Wrap for tonight. I'm Joe Concha. Bye-bye.